Hi, I'm Sarah. Today, I'm going to read you the story of Iris, which is titled like this. At Christmas, my dad announced, "We're selling the family business. You're getting nothing." My sister giggled. I smiled. "Who's the buyer?" Dad said, "Down Capital. They're paying $5 million." I laughed. "That's me." Silence. "Well, let's go. My name is Iris, and I grew up in what most people would call a privileged family. My father owned an investment company that he'd inherited from his grandfather. It was a family business, and Dad was incredibly proud of it. He always said he'd pass it down to his children someday. I have an older sister named Lauren, who's 3 years older than me. From the time we were kids, it was clear that Lauren was the favorite. She was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was always just there. When Lauren graduated from college, Dad immediately made her CEO of the company. I wasn't surprised. She'd always gotten everything handed to her. When I graduated a few years later, I joined the company too, but as an ordinary manager, just another employee. I worked hard, really hard, trying to prove myself. After a year of grinding away at boring reports and client meetings, I finally got up the courage to ask Dad about a promotion. "You need to work harder, Iris," he said without even looking up from his desk. "Show me you deserve it." I was already working 60-hour weeks, but okay, I'd work harder. A few months later, we had a family meeting at the office. It was one of those quarterly strategy sessions where Dad liked to hear everyone's ideas. This was my chance to show him I could think big. "Dad, I have an investment proposal," I said. "I think we should allocate some capital to cryptocurrency, Bitcoin specifically. It's new, but the technology behind it is solid, and I think it could be huge." This was years ago, back when Bitcoin had just appeared on the market, and most people had never heard of it. Lauren immediately laughed. "Are you serious? That's a complete scam, Iris. We'd lose all our money." "It's not a scam," I replied. "Yes, it's risky, but sometimes you have to take calculated risks. Everything we do here is so conservative. We're not innovating at all." Dad leaned back in his chair, looking at me like I'd suggested we invest in magic beans. "Iris, you're a dreamer. You need to come back to reality. This idea is nonsense. Our clients need stability, not your wild experiments." "But Dad, this isn't a suggestion," Lauren interrupted. "This is embarrassing. Dad, you need to fire her. She's clearly not cut out for this business." I felt my face get hot. "Lauren, that's not fair. I'm trying to help us stay competitive." "Lauren is right," Dad said. "She's stupid. She's fired. I'll pay her severance if she leaves immediately." I stared at him. "What?" "Don't even give her a bonus," Lauren added. "She hasn't done anything useful for this company anyway." I looked at my mother, who was sitting quietly at the end of the table. She'd always been the peacemaker in our family. Surely, she'd say something. Mom just nodded in agreement with Lauren. "I think it's for the best, dear." I couldn't believe this was happening. My own father was firing me in front of the whole family, and nobody was standing up for me. "Fine," I said, standing up. "I'll leave." Dad did pay me severance, $100,000. It was generous by most standards, but it felt like hush money, like he was paying me to disappear quietly. So, that's exactly what I did. I packed up my apartment, said goodbye to the few friends I had in town, and moved to another state. I needed a fresh start somewhere my family's name and reputation didn't follow me around. In my new city, I found a job at a different investment company. It wasn't as prestigious as Dad's firm, but they appreciated my work ethic. I bought a small apartment with a mortgage, using some of my severance as a down payment. And the rest of that money? I invested it exactly where my father said I shouldn't, in cryptocurrency, specifically in Bitcoin. My family thought I was stupid and reckless. Maybe I was. But I'd done my research, and I believed in the technology. For the first year, nothing much happened. The value went up and down, and I just held on to my investment and focused on my job. I worked hard, got promoted to senior analyst, and started building a real career for myself. Then, a few years later, everything changed. Bitcoin's value skyrocketed. The money I'd invested from my severance grew exponentially. I watched my account balance climb higher and higher. $100,000 became $1 million, then $10 million, then $50 million. When I finally cashed out a portion of my holdings, I had $250 million. I sat in my small apartment, staring at my bank account, barely able to process what I was seeing. I'd turned my father's severance payment into a fortune that dwarfed anything his company had ever made. I set aside a significant amount of that money for security and future investments. With the rest, I did something I'd been dreaming about since the day Dad fired me. I started my own investment company, but I didn't want to do it the way my father had done it. His company was built on playing it safe, on never taking risks, on doing the same thing year after year. I wanted to be different. I invested in promising startups, in neural networks, in AI technology before it was mainstream. I took calculated risks on companies and ideas that traditional investors ignored. I also didn't use my real name for the business. I wanted my work to stand on its own merit, not be connected to my family's reputation in any way. Instead, I named my company after my dog, a purebred with an official name a mile long, but I always just called her Mr. Downtown. So, my company became Downtown Capital Investment. Over the next 7 years, I built that company into something real. We had major wins with several startups that went on to become household names. Our AI investments paid off massively. We got written up in financial magazines and made it into the Forbes ratings. And through all of this, I didn't contact my family once. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, nothing. They'd made it clear I wasn't welcome in their world, so I built my own. 12 years after leaving my family, I was sitting in my corner office overlooking the city when my assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Iris, there's some news about your father's company you might want to see." I hadn't followed my family's business in years, but something made me take the folder she handed me. Inside was a financial report showing that my father's company was on the verge of bankruptcy. He was actively looking for buyers. I should have felt satisfied. After all, they'd mocked my ideas and fired me. But instead, I just felt curious. What had gone so wrong? "Get our legal team to dig into this," I told my assistant. "I want a complete financial analysis of that company." A week later, I was reading through a thick dossier on my father's firm. The picture it painted was grim. The company had been losing money for 3 years straight. Dad was still using the same conservative investment strategies he'd always used, refusing to adapt to the changing market. While his competitors had moved into cryptocurrency and startup investments, Dad had stubbornly stuck with traditional bonds and safe stocks. The world had changed, but he hadn't changed with it. Lauren was still CEO, but from what I could see, she barely worked. Her social media was full of photos from expensive resorts, yachts, and designer boutiques. She and her husband seemed to spend more time at parties than in the office. The company that had once been my family's pride was dying, and nobody seemed to know how to save it. I called my lawyer into my office. "I want to buy this company. Start negotiating." He looked at me like I was crazy. "Ms. Iris, with all due respect, there's not much value there. The company is struggling, and I don't see how it would generate significant profit for us." "This isn't about profit," I said. "It's personal." He nodded slowly. "Understood. I'll start the process." 2 days later, he came back with numbers. "The company is worth maybe $5 million at most. Given their financial situation, we could probably negotiate down to $3.5 million. "Pay them the full $5 million, I said. "Don't negotiate. Offer the maximum price." Over the next month, my legal team worked out all the details of the purchase. We scheduled the contract signing for early January, right after the new year. Christmas was coming up, and for the first time in 10 years, I decided to visit my family. Nobody had invited me. They probably didn't even know how to contact me anymore. But I wanted to see their faces when they realized who'd bought their company. I flew into my hometown on Christmas Eve and checked into a nice hotel. The next morning, I drove to my parents' estate, the massive house I'd grown up in. I rang the doorbell and waited. My mother opened the door, and her mouth literally fell open. "Iris, is that really you?" "Hi, Mom. Merry Christmas." I walked past her into the familiar entrance hall. Not much had changed. Same expensive furniture, same paintings on the walls. The only difference was that Lauren was there with her husband now, some guy I'd never met. Lauren stood up from the dining table where everyone was having breakfast. What are you doing here? Why did you show up today? I came to see my family for Christmas. Is that not allowed? You probably heard about Dad selling the company, she said with a nasty smile. Let me guess, you came to beg for a share of the money. Well, you're not getting a dime from us. Dad stood up, puffing out his chest. That's right. I'm selling my company in just a few days. It's going to be a very profitable deal. Really? I said. What's the buyer's name? Downtown Capital Investment, Lauren said smugly. Not that the name would mean anything to you. I couldn't help it. I started laughing. Downtown Capital Investment is my company. I'm the founder and CEO. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. That's not funny, Lauren finally said. Stop making jokes. I pulled a business card from my purse and handed it to my father. My name was embossed in silver letters right next to the company name. Dad's face turned red. You did this on purpose. You're trying to get revenge on your own family. You want to humiliate me. Actually, I'm trying to buy a failing company at a fair price. I'm canceling the deal, he announced. Right now, I won't sell to you. I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of documents, laying them on the table. The deal was finalized weeks ago. We signed a preliminary agreement. If you back out now, there will be serious financial penalties. You're trying to cheat your own father, he shouted. I won't sell my company so cheaply. Dad, the real value of your business is $3.5 million. I'm paying you $5 million only because it's the family company. You're actually getting more than it's worth. That's impossible, Lauren shrieked. You don't have that kind of money. This is some kind of scam. I have plenty of money. My company's assets are worth $250 million. I could buy 10 companies like Dad's without blinking. We're in the Forbes ratings. Your own lawyers have been checking the legitimacy of this deal for a month. Nobody spoke. Mom looked pale. Dad had sat back down heavily in his chair. Lauren's husband was staring at me with his mouth open. You have a few more days to think about it, I said calmly. But remember the penalty clauses for backing out, and remember what it would do to your reputation in the business community if you break a signed agreement. I turned and walked out, leaving them all sitting there in shocked silence. Over the next few days, my phone was flooded with messages from my parents begging to talk. Lauren sent a text proposing that instead of buying the company, I should just invest $5 million for a 40% stake. I texted back, not interested. I'm only buying the full company. The day of the contract signing arrived. My father signed every document with a look of pure displeasure on his face. Lauren stood nearby, glaring at me the whole time. After the last signature, Lauren walked over to me. I'd like to stay with the company in my current position. There's a board meeting tomorrow, I said. We'll discuss your employment status. The next day, I walked into the boardroom of what was now my company. The board of directors sat around the table, people my father had worked with for years. Lauren sat at the far end, trying to look confident. My parents were there too, watching nervously. I had my assistant set up a projector and pulled up the presentation I'd prepared the night before. Good morning, everyone. As the new owner of this company, I've conducted a thorough review of our operations. Today, I want to discuss our current CEO's performance. I clicked to the first slide. This chart shows travel expenses for the past 3 years. Lauren, your travel costs increased 40% each year. I had business meetings, she said. These expenses include first-class flights to Paris, Monaco, and the Caribbean, I continued. They include stays at 5-star resorts. And this line item here, I pointed, that's charging your entire vacation wardrobe to the company. Designer clothes, shoes, handbags, all paid for with company funds. Lauren's face turned red. Those were business expenses. And this, I clicked to another slide, cosmetologist services, spa treatments, personal shopping consultants, all billed to the company as professional development. Lauren, your personal expenses charged to this company total hundreds of thousands of dollars. The board members were looking at the numbers with shocked expressions. None of them had seen this breakdown before. I moved to terminate Lauren's employment, effective immediately, I said. All in favor? One of the board members asked. Every hand went up. Even my parents didn't vote against it. Lauren stood up so fast her chair fell over. This is a setup. You planned this whole thing just to humiliate me. I plan to review all executives' performance, I said. The numbers speak for themselves. I hate you, she screamed. You're doing this because you're jealous. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. My parents got up to follow her, but Dad turned back to glare at me. You deliberately shamed your sister in front of everyone. You wanted revenge. She got what she deserved, I said calmly. She embezzled company funds for personal use. That's called fraud. They left without another word. Over the next few weeks, I restructured the company completely. I brought in my own management team, updated our investment strategies, and made the company a branch of Downtown Capital Investment. Within 3 months, we were profitable again. My parents kept trying to contact me, text messages, phone calls, even letters. I ignored most of them, but finally agreed to meet them for coffee. They looked older than I remembered. Dad, especially, seemed worn down. We need to talk about the money, Dad said once we sat down. We gave half of what you paid us to Lauren. We thought it was only fair since she'd worked at the company all those years. Okay, but there's a problem. Lauren's husband has a gambling addiction. He lost most of their share paying off his debts. Lauren used a big chunk of what was left to cover more of his gambling losses. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. And I had some debts of my own, Dad continued. Business loans I'd taken out trying to keep the company afloat. We had to use most of the remaining money to pay those off. So, you're broke, I said. We have some money left, Mom said quickly. But not enough to maintain our lifestyle. We can't keep the house. We'll have to move somewhere smaller. That sounds like a practical decision. Dad's face turned red. Is that all you have to say? We're your parents. And you fired me and called me stupid. You mocked my ideas and kicked me out of the family business. Now you want my help. We made mistakes, Mom said. We're sorry. If you're really struggling, sell the estate and buy a smaller house. Take whatever money you have left, and I can help you invest it properly. Not give you money, but help you invest what you have so you'll have income in retirement. Dad stood up. We don't need investment advice. We need actual help. And you're refusing to give it. I'm offering you exactly what I would offer any client. If that's not good enough, that's your choice. They left angry, and I didn't hear from them for months. Then one day, my lawyer called. Your parents have contacted us about investing $500,000 with your company. Set up a standard client account, I said. Same terms as anyone else. Are you sure? They're your parents. Which is exactly why they get the same treatment as everyone else, no special favors. The investment account was opened, and I put their money into a conservative but solid portfolio. Over the following year, they made a 15% return, enough to live comfortably in retirement, but nothing extravagant. I found out through mutual acquaintances that Lauren had finally convinced her husband to go to rehab for his gambling addiction. They were in therapy, working on their marriage and their finances. She'd gotten a regular job at a marketing firm, not CEO, just a regular employee, like I'd been. Part of me felt bad about how everything had turned out. But a bigger part of me knew that Lauren needed to learn what it was like to work for something instead of having it handed to her. As for my parents, they eventually sold their mansion and bought a nice, but modest house in a retirement community. They seemed to adjust to their new lifestyle, though I'm sure it was hard for them at first. My mother called me one evening about 6 months after they'd invested with my company. Iris, I wanted to thank you for treating us fairly, not for giving us special treatment, but for treating us the same way you'd treat anyone else. We didn't deserve even that much after how we treated you. You're welcome, Mom. I know we can never make up for firing you and choosing Lauren over you all those years, but I want you to know that I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You were right about everything, about taking risks, about cryptocurrency, about innovation. We should have listened to you. It was the closest thing to a real apology I'd ever gotten from either of my parents. I appreciate you saying that. Will you come visit us sometime? Not for business, just as family. I thought about it. Maybe. Let me check my schedule. That's all I can ask for. After we hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the city skyline. I'd built an empire from the ashes of my family's rejection. I'd proven everyone wrong who said I was stupid and reckless. But the victory felt different than I'd imagined it would, not triumphant, exactly, just complete. I'd gotten my revenge by succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. I'd bought my father's company and fired my sister. I'd made my family see that I was right all along. 2 years had passed since I'd bought my father's company. Downtown Capital Investment had grown even larger, and the branch that used to be Dad's firm was now one of our most profitable divisions. I'd completely overhauled their investment strategy, and we were seeing returns that my father had never dreamed possible. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant buzzed me. "Your mother is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." I hesitated. My parents and I had maintained a polite but distant relationship. We talked on the phone maybe once a month, always brief conversations about safe topics like the weather or their investment returns. "Send her in." Mom walked into my office looking nervous. She was dressed simply, nothing like the designer outfits she used to wear. "Hi, Iris. Thank you for seeing me without notice. Is everything okay? Is Dad all right?" "He's fine. We're both fine, actually. Better than we've been in years, thanks to the returns on our investment." "Good. So, what brings you here?" She sat down across from my desk. "I wanted to talk to you about Lauren." I felt my shoulders tense up. "What about her?" "She and her husband have been in therapy for over a year now. He's been clean from gambling for 18 months. Lauren has been working at that marketing firm, and she's actually doing well." "I'm glad to hear that. She wants to talk to you to apologize properly." "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. I know there's a lot of hurt between you two, but she's genuinely changed. She understands now what it's like to work hard for something, to not have everything handed to her. She called me stupid. She demanded that Dad fire me. She laughed when my ideas were rejected." "I know. And she knows how wrong she was." "We all do." I looked at my mother and saw genuine regret in her eyes. "Why no?" "It's been years." "Because she's finally in a place where she can face what she did. And because life is short, and we've wasted too much time already." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep that door closed forever, but another part of me was tired of carrying around all that anger. "I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." A few weeks later, I agreed to meet Lauren for coffee. We met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our cities. She looked different than I remembered, less polished, more real somehow. No designer clothes, just regular jeans and a sweater. "Thank you for coming," she said as we sat down. "I was horrible to you. Not just when Dad fired you, but for years before that. I always felt threatened by you, by how smart you were, by how hard you worked. So, I put you down to make myself feel better." "Okay. And that day you proposed the cryptocurrency investment?" I knew it was actually a good idea. "That's why I shut it down so hard. I was terrified that Dad would see you were smarter than me." "That surprised me." "You knew." "I'd been reading about Bitcoin. I knew the potential was there. But I couldn't let you be right, because then I'd have to admit I wasn't the smart one anymore. So, you got me fired instead." "Yes. And I've regretted it every single day since. Not because you became successful, though. Well, that made me realize how stupid I'd been, but because I lost my sister." I stirred my coffee, not sure what to say. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away," Lauren continued. "I just want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. And if you ever want to have a relationship again, even just as acquaintances, I'd like that. I need time." "I understand." We finished our coffee mostly in silence, but it wasn't the angry silence from before. It was more like a truce. Over the next year, Lauren and I started talking occasionally. Brief texts at first, then phone calls. She told me about her job, her therapy, her husband's recovery. I told her about my business, about the new AI startups I was investing in. It wasn't the sister relationship we'd had as kids, and it would never be that again. Too much had happened. But it was something. My parents continued to do well with their investments. They'd adjusted to their simpler lifestyle and seemed genuinely happier. Dad even admitted to me once that he'd been miserable running the company those last few years, trying to maintain an image of success when everything was falling apart. "You saved me," he said during a rare visit to my office. "I know that's not what you intended, but that's what you did. You took that burden off my shoulders and turned the company into something successful again. As for me, my company kept growing. We made strategic investments in emerging technologies, in promising entrepreneurs, in ideas that traditional investors thought were too risky. Sometimes we failed, but more often we succeeded spectacularly. I'd proven everyone wrong who doubted me. I'd built something bigger and better than my family's company had ever been. I'd gotten my revenge in the most satisfying way possible, by succeeding beyond their wildest dreams. But somewhere along the way, the revenge stopped mattering as much. What mattered was that I'd built a life I was proud of on my own terms. My family, and I would never be close the way some families are. Too much damage had been done for that. But we'd found a way to coexist, to have relationships that were honest, even if they weren't warm. Lauren still refused to reach out sometimes, going months without contact. But when she did call or text, it was genuine, no pretense, no manipulation, just real conversation, and you know what? That was enough. I didn't need my family's approval anymore. I didn't need them to admit I'd been right all along, though they had.